Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and magic puzzle boxes. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're finally ranking the Hellraiser movies. In the past 3 months, I've gone back and watched all 10 of these damn things, and I've gone back and forth on which ones I think are better and worse and why, and I'm finally at a place where I think I'm comfortable sharing this list. I used a ton of different criteria for ranking these movies, but they basically break down into this list. First is the ambition of the movie, which is more set around the story and the plot. How much did the movie set out to do in the first place? Second is the quality of the movie, meaning the acting, the lighting, the locations, the camera work. Do all those things help elevate the movie and meet its ambitions? Third is the quality of the Cenobites and related lore. In a series with 10 movies, continuity and consistency is important. Does the movie fit into the universe it's supposed to? And finally, how fun and scary the movie is. Is the movie actually enjoyable to watch as a horror movie? Is it boring? Are there any really scary moments to speak of? If you haven't already, be sure to go and watch my full reviews of all the Hellraiser movies, or don't. I'm sure 3.5 hours of Hellraiser reviews can be daunting for most people. I'll be giving each film a little bit of an overview, but I'm mostly just going to be talking about why I placed the movie here, what I enjoyed about it, what I didn't, and what could be improved upon. Before I jump in, I just want to say these are just my opinions, and it's okay if you disagree with them. The Hellraiser series has a lot of good and a lot of bad. There's something for everyone to love and something for everyone to hate, so I'm sure everyone's list is a little bit different. With that, let's start the rankings. Number 10. Coming in dead last is the same for most people, Hellraiser Revelations. This 9th entry in the series was concocted in less than a month and it shows. It rehashes a ton of the plot points from the original, so it actually feels more like a Hellraiser than some of the entries on this list, but these rehashed plots are so quickly glossed over, they don't even have the same impact that they should. Not to mention, this is by far the worst acting the series has ever seen, and most of the characters are written to be so completely unlikable, leaving the viewer with just annoyance the whole film. Revelations was the first Hellraiser to not have Doug Bradley, and his replacement just couldn't hold a candle to him. The movie also goes a bit too excessively on the violence for me, which I know is weird to say in a horror franchise about torture demons, but most Hellraisers are really fun to watch. This one is just dreadful in all the wrong ways. While the new Pinhead looks pretty wrong, the prosthetics in general are pretty good, and are one of the very few positives I have for this movie. In general, I would say skip it. It's not worth the time. Number 9. Unsurprisingly, up next is Hellraiser Hellworld. Hellworld is really tough to get through. It is by far the one to misuse and waste the Cenobites most. The acting is still pretty bad, and every character is a 2000s teenage stereotype. The entire premise is so ill-contrived, and the twists and retwists do not leave the viewer at the edge of their seat. If anything, it leaves them asleep in their seat. Everything is a hallucination, so the Cenobites are acting like boring, typical slashers, only for them to make an actual appearance at the very end, but that then makes the entire rest of the movie make no sense. Lance Henriksen is a slight saving grace, but he couldn't make this a good movie on his own. It doesn't take itself too seriously, so some people may have fun with it, but I'll be happy to never watch it again. Number 8. Number 8 is going to Hellraiser Hellseeker. Hellseeker had a chance to revitalize the series with the return of Kirsty Cotton, but any chance of that got shat all over. It takes Kirsty's character and not only wastes it, but manages to desecrate it. Aside from Revelations, Hellseeker has the most hateable protagonist in the series. The entire plot of this movie is we follow this shitty guy as he slowly remembers how shitty he is. Not to mention, this was the first to become so dependent on the anger-inducing fake-outs that start to consume this series. The movie doesn't do anything new, it's just a way worse version of Inferno. The Cenobites are few and far between and look cheap to boot. All the good dialogue between Pinhead and Kirsty was taken out of the film for some unknown reason. The kills suck, the CGI cop really sucks, and it just isn't fun or scary or interesting. Number 7. Number 7 wraps up the Boda trilogy with Hellraiser Deader. I should note this is the first transition in my list to the movies I would not entirely recommend people skip. Deader still suffers from all of the issues I've noted in Hellworld and Hellseeker. Most of the acting is rough, the plot doesn't really make sense within the continuity created in Bloodline, and there still isn't enough of the Cenobites. But Deader luckily has Carrie Woover, who is able to carry this movie decently. She has a few good scenes like the knife in the back where she actually conveys fear, sadness, and regret. Things a lot of the horrible Hellraiser protagonists around this time just can't do for some fucking reason. The cult doesn't make much sense, their goals are very unclear, but they just serve to be shish kebabbed by Pinhead, so it doesn't really matter. Speaking of, we get a little bit more of Pinhead in Deader than Hellseeker or Hellworld, and in these later entries, more Pinhead essentially equals better. All in all, I'm able to have a pretty fun time watching Deader despite its flaws, which I just can't say about the others before it. Number 6. Coming in 6th is the most recent entry, Hellraiser Judgment. Judgment has a lot going for it actually. The acting and prosthetics are the best we've seen in like 20 years. While not Doug Bradley level, our new Pinhead does a really solid job, and I really like the Auditor. The Stygian Inquisition is an interesting new concept, but it gets a little too gross a little too often, and I think most viewers agree it's to the movie's detriment. While the Cenobite and general hell portion of Judgment thrive, the human portion struggles. It's a very generic cop serial killer storyline, borrowing heavily from movies like Seven. The addition of Heaven also hurts the movie. It just feels like a necessity to move the plot forward and ultimately gives us a really half-baked, rushed end sequence. I don't think it's a movie I'll revisit anytime soon, but it is definitely a breath of semi-fresh air for the very stale series. Number 5. Starting off the top half of the list is Hellraiser Inferno. It's the first straight-to-video Hellraiser, as well as the first to start with a spec script. That being said, it manages to intertwine the Hellraiser themes into this cop storyline pretty well. The story is less predictable than previous movies on this list, and it actually takes us down some strange roads for a bit. It has some of my favorite new Cenobites, the Wire Twins and Torso, and it just has a finished film quality a lot of the others behind it just don't. Thorn is the start of our unlikable male leads, but the first time around it's done better and he isn't horribly annoying. The movie does have a serious lack of Pinhead. He essentially isn't around until the end, but the other Cenobites, the engineer, and other hallucinatory moments keep me interested enough to make up for it. Number 4. Number 4 is Hellraiser Bloodline. This is probably the one I had the most trouble placing. It really moved around from 3rd to 8th on this list while I was figuring it out. Bloodline is such an enigma. It's a weird movie. Not many movies have a 3-timeline story, one of which is in space, and not many fourth movies in a series create such a large amount of rules and history and lore within its universe. We learn the history of the box and get a better timeline of the Cenobite's existence. It's got Angelique, who is absolutely badass, and Pinhead has that residual badass dialogue from Hell on Earth. But Bloodline is such a hot mess. It's a very crammed movie, and the ambitious plot clearly spread the budget too thin, especially in the crappy looking space station. But the key to why it landed number 4 is its ambition. It tried so many new things, and while a lot didn't work, it is still a very interesting and unique watch. Number 3. I also really had trouble placing my 2 and 3. If it simply came down to which one I enjoy watching more, this would be my number 2, but with all the factors I put in place for myself, this had to be number 3. My number 3 is Hell on Earth. I know some people hate it, but I get a real kick out of Hell on Earth. I know the pseudo-Cenobites Pinhead creates are pretty whack, but that's really my only complaint about this movie. I think it does a solid job of following up on Hellbound's shitstorm of an ending, and it brings way more depth to Elliot Spencer, and by far gives us the greatest Doug Bradley performance of all time. Some fans don't like that Pinhead isn't so morally ambiguous in Hell on Earth, but I personally enjoy seeing these two sides of a character literally manifest and take each other on. Uncontrolled Pinhead causes so much chaos, and it's so much fun to watch. This is the Hellraiser that took Pinhead from being a popular horror character to becoming a household name. It's the most Hollywood the series gets. It ditches the gothic tone and the subtle themes of the first two, but it's a fun movie to sit down with a beer and popcorn with, and that's what it set out to be in the first place. Number 2. Despite a long inner debate, I decided Hellbound earned the spot. But I actually have a lot of issues with Hellbound. I do think there are a lot of cliches in Hellbound, such as the insane asylum, and most characters are reduced down to 1 or 2 main character traits. The discovery that the Cenobites were once human is so ham-fisted in and shouldn't be the big ordeal that it is. Channard is really fucking annoying. Tiffany being mute is just lazy. And they simply didn't have the budget to make the labyrinth all it should have been. All of that being said, I cannot deny the ambition of the movie and the influence Hellbound has had on the genre. It has inspired so many other horror films, and a lot of the film is pretty solid. The score adds so much fear and tension to certain scenes, and it does successfully expand the Cenobites and show us more of their world. It's great to have Kirsty, Frank, and Julia back. I do think the death of the original 4 Cenobites was a mistake. It left the series in a weird place to continue, but it has so many memorable images: skinless Frank and Julia, Julia's skin suit blowing in the wind, Leviathan's giant dick making Channard do his happy dance. It's so uniquely Hellraiser. It's a crazy, gothic, bloody, surreal mess, but it's a classic for that exact reason. Number 1. And finally, my number 1 spot has to go to the original. Hellraiser lit a match under the horror genre. It defied norms and brought so much originality with it. The small scale of watching a family unravel works so well, and the physical transformation of Frank throughout the movie is in Special Effects Hall of Fame. The most interesting part for me is that the Cenobites are on the outskirts of the film. It has an entire cast of well-developed characters. Kirsty, Larry, Frank, and Julia are all pretty much equally the protagonist, and I think their strong character development is what holds it together so well. And once the engineer shows up, you realize you're in for some crazy shit. While they aren't really scary in any of the sequels, the Cenobites are truly unnerving in the original, not to mention just how cool the Cenobites are. If any of you haven't seen it, I can't recommend Hellraiser enough. It certainly has its issues here and there, mostly with dumb character decisions, but all in all, it's a really fun, unique horror movie with a ton of complex relationships, themes, and symbolism. So that's about it. Do you agree with my list? Disagree? I've actually never seen 2 people have the exact same list, so please put them down below. I'd love to see them. Hellraiser is such a unique series. It is probably the most mismanaged franchise I've ever seen, but it had and it still has so much potential to make some really good films. Whether we ever get another one or not, your guess is as good as mine. Well, as always, I'm Noah Hook, and this has been Hamburgers and Horror. Thanks for watching, y'all. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching this episode of Hamburgers and Horror. If you like this video, be sure to go like and subscribe so you can see all of my other Hellraiser content. And also go check me out on Instagram. I do lots of other things aside from review horror movies. And if you want to support the channel further, you can go become a patron on Patreon. Thanks y'all, stay safe out there.